Let me ask you a question. What are you believing for today? Not what you think you can do, not what your job says is possible, not what your bank account tells you is realistic, but what are you believing God for? See, the size of your dream tells me the size of your faith, and the size of your faith reveals the size of your God. If everything in your life is explainable without faith, then you're not living big enough. Today is the day you stop waiting for perfect conditions and step out in bold faith, trusting God for the impossible. Faith begins where logic ends. That's the intersection where natural understanding ceases and supernatural expectation begins. Logic is based on what we can see, touch, measure, or control. It relies on data, patterns, and probabilities. But faith steps in when none of that makes sense. Aha, we begin. Maybe the best case scenario is where your logical mind kind of works its way through, not taking into consideration. Faith steps in when none of that makes sense. Faith looks at a locked door and sees a hallway. It looks at an empty bank account and sees provision. It looks at a diagnosis and sees healing. Logic is limited by what's possible. Faith is empowered by what's promised. If you live by logic alone, you'll only pursue what you think can happen. You'll stay in safe zones, settle for predictable outcomes, and never stretch beyond your comfort zone. But faith demands risk. It asks you to step even when you don't see the staircase. That doesn't mean faith is reckless. It means it's rooted in something deeper than reason. It's rooted in trust. Trust in a God who sees what you don't, who knows what you can't, and who's already in the future waiting for your belief to catch up. Faith requires you to silence the voice in your head that says, what if it fails? And turn up the voice that says, what if it works? Because when you rely on logic, you'll talk yourself out of your destiny. Logic says a shepherd can't beat a giant. Logic says 5 loaves and 2 fish can't feed thousands. Logic says a man can't walk on water. But every time faith replaced logic, the miraculous showed up. That's the power of trusting beyond your understanding. An excellent example is found in the story of Abraham. God told him to leave his country, his family, and his father's house to go to a land I will show you. God told him, no map, no address, no timeline, just a command and a promise. Logic would have said, wait, where are we going? What are the living conditions? What's the economic stability? But Abraham didn't ask for coordinates. He moved. He stepped out based not on evidence, but on confidence. And because he chose faith over logic, he became the father of many nations. Had he waited until everything made sense, he would have missed everything God had planned. Faith doesn't deny facts, but it doesn't bow to them either. It acknowledges the reality of the situation, but refuses to be limited by it. Faith looks facts in the face and still says, God is able. That's where transformation begins. When you stop demanding answers and start walking in obedience, you make room for divine intervention. So if everything in your life makes perfect sense, you might not be walking by faith. The moment you let go of needing to know how and when, and instead focus on who, that's when you'll see God move. Faith doesn't start where logic is clear. It starts when logic has run out of ideas. And that's exactly where miracles begin. God specializes in the impossible because he's not confined by the limits of human understanding, natural law, or earthly resources. What seems like a dead end to man is simply a doorway for him. He doesn't operate according to our restrictions. He operates according to his authority. While people look at impossibility and see defeat, God looks at impossibility and sees an opportunity to display his glory. It's not just that he can do the impossible, it's that the impossible is his specialty. Most of us are comfortable trusting God for things we think are within reach. We ask for healing when the condition is treatable. We ask for provision when the numbers are close. We ask for restoration when relationships are already softening. But faith isn't really tested until it has to. Believe beyond hope when there's no sign, no evidence, no logical path forward. That's where God does his best work. When man gives up, God shows up. When it's impossible for you, it's perfect for him. The reason God moves in the impossible is because it forces us to stop relying on ourselves. As long as we think we can fix it, we'll keep trying. But when we come to the end of our strength, our ideas, and our influence, that's when we finally surrender, and that's where his power takes over. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. He doesn't need our resources, he needs our faith. The impossible becomes the breeding ground for miracles when we shift from trying to trusting. Consider the story of Lazarus. He had been dead for 4 days, not sick, not unconscious, dead. People had already given up. The mourners had gathered. The tomb was sealed. Logic said, it's over. But Jesus arrived on the scene and said something shocking. Take away the stone. And when they hesitated, he reminded them, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Then he called out, Lazarus, come forth. And a man who had been lifeless walked out of his grave. That's not a medical recovery. That's a supernatural reversal. That's the kind of situation only God can touch. That's what it looks like when the impossible meets divine authority. If God can raise the dead, part the seas, stop the sun, and create worlds with his words, then what exactly is too hard for him? The answer is nothing. But the key is not in God's ability, it's in your belief. He already can do it. The question is, do you believe he will? Because when you truly believe God specializes in the impossible, you stop praying small, you stop living safe, and you stop expecting natural results. You start moving in bold faith because you know you're backed by a supernatural God. The impossible is not your limitation. It's God's invitation. It's his stage to show the world that he's still in control, still working, still powerful, and still willing. When the situation is impossible, that's when heaven leans in and says, now let me handle this. Movement activates miracles because faith is not just a belief system. It's an action system. God responds to faith, and faith is proven by movement. Many people are waiting for a sign before they move, but in the kingdom, movement is the sign that you believe. You can pray, fast, and declare all day long, but if you never take a step, you're not walking by faith. You're just hoping. Faith is not passive. It doesn't sit around waiting for perfect conditions. It moves, even when it's uncomfortable, uncertain, and unseen. The Bible says faith without works is dead. That means faith that doesn't move is faith that doesn't work. God honors action. He multiplies momentum. He blesses obedience in motion. The miracle isn't usually on the front side of the step. It's on the back side. God honors the step. It's on the back side. In other words, you don't see the see part before you move. You see it part while you move. That's why the first step is always the hardest and the most powerful. It's not just about doing something. It's about doing something that proves you trust him. When God told Abraham to go to a land he would show him, Abraham moved without knowing the destination. That's movement. When Moses lifted his staff at the Red Sea, God split the waters. That's movement. When the 10 lepers were told to go show themselves to the priest, they were healed as they went. That's movement, activating the miracle. One of the most vivid examples is Peter walking on water. Jesus didn't calm the storm first. He didn't turn the sea into a sidewalk. He simply said, come. Now, Peter could have stayed in the boat and rationalized it. He could have waited for the waves to stop, but instead he moved. He stepped out of the boat in the middle of chaos. That first step was the evidence of his faith. And because he moved, he experienced something no other disciple did. He walked on water. The miracle met him on the water, not in the boat. Too often people say, I'm waiting on God, but the truth is God is waiting on them. You're not stuck because God hasn't spoken. You're stuck because you haven't moved. Miracles are often hidden behind doors labeled obedience, and movement is the key that opens them. Sometimes it's not your situation that needs to change, it's your position. And until you take that step, you'll keep circling the same mountain. Movement is proof you believe God is who he says he is. When you act like the promise is already yours, you attract the power that brings it to pass. You may not know how it's going to work out, but that's not your job. Your job is to move. Step toward the vision. Step toward the dream. Step toward the breakthrough. Because when you move in faith, heaven moves with you. And that's where miracles begin. Delayed doesn't mean denial because God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't match your own. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. We often confuse silence with absence and delay with rejection. But God's delays are not his denials. They are divine setups for something greater than you imagined. What looks like a pause is often preparation. What feels like being stuck is really God building strength, character, and endurance inside of you. Delay is a tool God uses to mature your faith, not to crush your hope. Most people give up in the waiting season. They think if something was truly from God, it would have happened by now. But faith doesn't operate on your clock. It flows according to God's divine calendar. His ways are higher, his thoughts are deeper, and his process is more intentional. He knows what you need, when you need it, and how to deliver it in a way that brings him glory and brings you growth. If he gave you what you prayed for too early, it might overwhelm you, ruin you, or cause you to depend on the gift more than the giver. So instead, he delays not to deny you, but to develop you. Waiting is not a waste when it's God who's in charge of the time. Sometimes you're not waiting for the blessing. The blessing is waiting for you to become the person who can carry it. Think about it. If a child inherits a fortune before they've learned stewardship, it becomes a curse, not a blessing. Likewise, God waits until you're ready, responsible, and rooted enough to handle what he's about to release. A powerful example of this truth is found in the life of Joseph. As a teenager, he received a dream from God, one where he would be in a position of great influence and leadership. But almost immediately after that dream, his life took a downward spiral. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. For years, nothing looked like the promise God gave him. It would have been easy to believe that God had denied him. But God hadn't said no. He was saying, not yet. The delay was preparing Joseph's heart, sharpening his leadership, and positioning him exactly where he needed to be. And at the right time, in one single day, Joseph went from the prison to the palace. That delay wasn't a denial, it was a setup for destiny. It was a setup for destiny. It was a setup for destiny. It was a setup for when it feels like God is taking too long, remind yourself he is never late. Delay is divine. It teaches you to trust when you don't see, to persevere when you don't feel, and to believe when everything says give up. Keep praying, keep sowing, keep believing. What he promised, he will perform. The wait might be long, but the reward will be worth it. Delay doesn't mean denial. it means destiny is still in motion. Your faith is a seed, plant it boldly because a seed does nothing until it's sown. You can hold it, admire it, talk about it, or protect it, but until it's released into the ground, it cannot grow. Faith works the same way. You can believe in theory, pray quietly, or dream privately, but until you take action, nothing changes. Faith isn't proven in your thoughts, it's proven in your step. When you plant your faith through obedience, giving, speaking, or moving, you activate a divine process that produces results far beyond what you planted. Seeds are small and unimpressive when you hold them in your hand. They don't look like trees or orchards or harvests, but locked inside each seed is potential. That potential doesn't come to life in safety, it comes alive in soil, buried, hidden, and unseen. The same is true of your faith. It has power to move mountains, but not if you keep it in your pocket. You must be bold enough to plant it, even when there's no sign of rain. Bold enough to speak life, even when the situation looks dead. Bold enough to give, even when it feels like you don't have enough. The bold planting of your faith is what tells heaven, I trust you. The beauty of seeds is that they multiply. The beauty of seeds is that they trust you. The beauty of seeds is that they multiply because they seep themselves into your soul. The beauty of seeds is that they trust you. The beauty of seeds is that they multiply. The beauty of seeds is that they trust you. One seed can become a tree. One tree can produce hundreds of fruits. Each fruit carries more seed. That's how the kingdom of God operates, by multiplication, not mere addition. When you sow your faith, the return is always greater than what you released. But it only works if you let go. If a farmer holds on to his seed because he's afraid of losing it, he guarantees he will never harvest. The same is true spiritually. You can't abide by definite deity. You have to abide by destiny. And when you withhold your faith out of fear or doubt, you cancel the very process that was meant to bless you. A perfect example of this is the widow at Zarephath. She was gathering sticks to prepare a final meal for herself and her son before they died. That was her plan. She had only a little flour and oil left. But then the prophet Elijah showed up and asked her to make him a small cake first. Now, logic would have told her to say no. Emotion would have said, it's too risky. But faith said yes. She planted the seed of obedience and provision. And because she planted in faith, the oil and flour in her house never ran out. She didn't die in famine. She lived in overflow. Her seed of faith unlocked a miracle that logic could never explain. When you understand that your faith is a seed, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting for perfect situations. You're supposed to, faith never unlocks a miracle. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You sow in drought. You give in uncertainty. You move in faith, not because it makes sense, but because you trust the God who brings increase. Bold faith produces bold results. Don't hold your faith. Plant it, speak it, move it, sow it, release it. Because in the soil of obedience, miracles grow. So here's the question. Are you ready to believe God for the impossible? Because the moment you do, your mindset shifts, your mouth shifts. Don't let fear keep you on the shoreline. Step into the deep. Walk in bold faith. Trust the God who parts seas, shuts mouths of lions, raises the dead, and turns water into wine. He didn't stop doing miracles, people just stopped believing for them. Today, dare to believe Speak the impossible. Expect the supernatural. And step out, because your faith is the key that unlocks heaven's abundance.